Well, it seems my theory about Jinshi going undercover as a courtesan was a bit off. Instead, he goes undercover as a commoner. But before we get more into that, let's go over how this episode kind of started out, which we pick up from where last week's episode left off, with Jinshi asking MaoMao to help him with his makeup. But not to disguise himself as a courtesan, but instead to make him look like a commoner. In other words, make him less pretty, which MaoMao seems to find great joy in accomplishing to some degree, even though he still comes out relatively handsome looking, but far less pretty and otherworldly looking than he usually does. Continuing on. So, after the process of MaoMao turning Jinshi into a commoner, they end up going out on the town, with her being dressed up as the daughter of a well-off family, and him being her attendant. For the most part, they are just kind of going around, checking things out. MaoMao treats him to some yakitori. They chat about a few things, but we don't get into the more serious aspects of the episode until towards the end, where we finally have Jinshi ask MaoMao how one lowers the value of a courtesan, and MaoMao says this is a very unpleasant thing to ask, but she still proceeds to answer his question regardless. And it is interesting because seems to be a few different ways, and she kind of goes into depth about where a courtesan's value comes from. Some of it is their appearance is a big factor. Then those who seem to do well are educated so that they can entertain guests in other ways, like through games or through more intellectual conversation. But then we get into some of the more deeper things that a courtesan's value comes from, such as her purity, meaning if she is still a virgin or not. And this is where we get into kind of the more unsavory areas of how we lower a courtesan's value. One of the things MaoMao brings up is that one way to lower their value is by, obviously, deflowering them, of course. And another way to completely destroy their value for the most part seems to be if they end up becoming pregnant. So if they give birth to a child, that seems to completely lower their value pretty much to nothing. And of course, there are some other various little ways of a courtesan's value dropping, like we mentioned earlier, such as them not being as pretty, less educated, not as well-rounded in things like music and dancing, things that they would learn to help entertain guests more effectively. But the major ones are what we just mentioned: deflowering, and of course, pregnancy. Now, these are very concerning because it brings up another question. So, if Lacan lowered the value of a courtesan, that means he not only deflowered one, but potentially got one pregnant. And if this courtesan he had his eyes on in the past that he brought up before, that had a personality that sounded somewhat similar to MaoMao's, and her appearance, from what we could see, also seemed to resemble MaoMao's to a degree, at least in terms of hair color and things like that, because we didn't get like a full-on look at their face or eyes from what I can recall. I could be wrong on that, but... So, does this mean that MaoMao's parentage could potentially stem from Lacan? Could Lacan potentially be MaoMao's real father? And is MaoMao's mother the courtesan whose value he lowered? These are very interesting questions we now have in our minds. Now, whoever Jinshi is supposed to be talking to in the next episode within this tea house, or wherever it is that he's meeting this person, is this the person he's going to talk to that'll disclose more information about this courtesan whose value Lacan had lowered? And will we get more tidbits about that person potentially being MaoMao's mother? Which could also mean this crazy-ass military tactician could potentially be her father, which would kind of suck because dude is shady as all hell, and I would not want MaoMao's father to be somebody as shady as his ass. but only time will tell. So I look forward to seeing where things go from here and what more information we learn as things progress. So I'll see you all for the next episode review of the Apothecary Diaries. With that said, Mr. Haori, out.